Our national security deserves to be taken seriously. It deserves actual oversight. This hearing today and all the others before, since we're on part 3 now, are not serious. My Republican colleagues are so hell-bent on making a boogeyman that they're deliberately ignoring actual problems we can address, and in the process, actually undermining our national security. And while our national security must be a priority, it must also be balanced in a way that is not bigoted, xenophobic, or racist.
There's a book recently written by Christopher Rufo, which has received a lot of favorable comment, in which he goes back and finds communists in the 70s pushing this racial divide, trying to divide America by race. And of course, we have a lot of DEI professionals throughout the government now who I think their goal is to divide America. And eventually destroy America by setting one ethnic group against the other. Is that something you think that Red China would like to have, or to push the idea that people should view themselves as members of a subgroup rather than individuals?
Whatever it takes. They would like to win without fighting.
Right, that's exactly right. They believe that they're going to take over the United States. I think Khrushchev did, that they would take it over without a fight. And then this is the type of division that will cause them to destroy America when American congressmen push this DEI garbage.
Only focusing on China and the CCP not only leaves us vulnerable to attacks from elsewhere, but it also poses a risk to the personal safety, civil rights, and civil liberties of Chinese Americans and Chinese immigrants living in the U.S. We saw this with the Trump administration's China initiative. They said this was meant to protect labs and businesses from espionage. Instead, it was used as a tool of discrimination. Nearly 90% of the more than 150 cases brought by the FBI under the initiative were against ethnically Chinese people, and many of the cases were the result of simple administrative errors and no obvious connection to national security or the theft of intellectual property or trade secrets. So, Mr. Stokes, how did this initiative affect Chinese American scientists, and did this impact our research landscape?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. I think overall the initiative was I think the Justice Department has said that it fostered an environment of at least apparent bias, right, and had a bit of a chilling factor over the scientific community. So while on the one hand it is certainly right that China is seeking to steal our technological and scientific secrets, I think it is right to refocus the initiative on the actual networks at play rather than kind of casting aspersions over a broad group of people.
Thank you. It's giving major HUAC fillings right now. This was just McCarthyism in a new form. Under the initiative, scientists falsely accused of having ties to the CCP had their labs appended and their careers compromised. But Republicans want to bring back the China initiative. In fact, House Republicans recently passed a bill that would do just that, though under a slightly different name, the CCP initiative. Mr. Stokes, with changing the name of the China initiative to the CCP initiative without any concrete changes to its implementation, make it more effective at uncovering efforts to steal U.S. intellectual property?
I think the name does matter, but I think as you indicated, what actually goes on under the auspices of the initiative matters just as much, if not more. And again, because of the scope of the threat, to be able to be focusing resources on areas that aren't where the threat is actually emanating from, I think means we'll miss some of where the threat is actually emanating from. And so to the extent that you can revise the initiative to focus more on the real networks at play, it would be both more effective and more consistent with our values.
So the assumption that a person is more likely to be a CCP spy because they're Chinese or because someone might think they look Chinese is incredibly harmful, and we've seen it happen in this very committee. In January 2023, Chairman Comer appeared to repeatedly accuse Kathy Chung, a U.S. citizen born in South Korea, very much not China, who previously served as an aide to then Vice President Biden, of being a CCP spy. We've also seen how the rhetoric around China, particularly from Republicans, has led to increased discrimination against Chinese Americans and Chinese immigrants in the United States. Just look back at what was being said during COVID. Trump frequently referred to COVID-19 as, quote, the China virus, the Chinese virus, and Kung flu. He's kept this going using this phrase at the RNC just this past July, and just last week at a town hall in Michigan. This language led to a dramatic increase in anti-Asian hate between 2019 and 2021, and 1 in 3 members of the AAPI community experienced racial abuse in 2023. Mr. Stokes, can you explain how this kind of language can contribute to an increase in hate incidents and racial abuse against Chinese and other Asian Americans?
I would say, in general, the President of the United States has an immense agenda-setting power, and so to use language of that nature does contribute, and in certain cases may, even enable people to take, bias and racially motivated actions. But again, I think, at least from my expertise, that about how it relates to strategic competition with China, the fact that we can be an inclusive, diverse society that's governed by the rule of law is something we have that China doesn't, that is an asset that we should work very hard to retain.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments. I just want to conclude by saying just the caution that when my colleagues speak about the CCP threat in careless or bigoted or xenophobic terms, they make all Chinese Americans and Chinese immigrants into a boogeyman, and it's wrong. We must talk about it in a way that gets very specifically at the harm, at the threats, and not in such a wide net that harms people who are innocent. I thank you, and I yield back.